She was fired for feeding a veteran. An hour later, 4 Marines walked into the caf. Don't forget to comment which country you're watching from. That morning, the corner caf was overflowing with the usual hustle and bustle. The clatter of plates, spoons stirring coffee, and conversations weaving between tables. Rosa, the ever-present waitress, with a genuine smile and a calm energy, walked between the tables with a plate of spaghetti in her hand. She respectfully handed it to an elderly man wearing a worn-out military cap. "Here you go, sir. It's on the house," she said in a voice that was soft but firm. The man looked up, surprised, and murmured with emotion, "Thank you, child. I didn't know how I was going to pay for this today." From the back of the establishment, a man in a suit shot up from his seat. It was Richard, the new general manager, a young, arrogant man who had arrived just a few weeks earlier with promises of modernizing the business and making it more efficient. He walked straight toward Rosa with a furious stride, not caring about the stares from the customers. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he yelled at her. Rosa tried to explain that the man was a homeless veteran who came every Thursday for a hot meal. "This place isn't a charity," Richard roared, as some patrons looked down, uncomfortable. Rosa kept her composure, but the tremor of injustice was visible in her eyes. "He's a hero, sir. He has no family, nothing. Just this calf," she answered, her voice trembling but resolute. Richard scoffed, crossed his arms, and said something that froze the room. "Well, he can take his heroism somewhere else. We don't serve black trash here." The silence was immediate. Outrage seized not only Rosa but the entire room. Some customers were left with their mouths agape. The veteran, his gaze fixed on his plate, seemed to have gone back in time to a war that never ended. Richard raised his voice again, this time pointing directly at Rosa. "You're fired. Hand over your apron right now." Rosa said nothing. She just lowered her gaze and dropped the apron on the table. The veteran looked at her as if they had just ripped away the last thing he had left. No one in the caf moved. No one said a thing. Only the heavy silence of injustice filled the air. An injustice that wasn't the first to happen. An injustice that this time felt crueler, more violent, more brazen. A woman from the back tried to intervene. "She only did the right thing," she said. But Richard shut her down with a look full of contempt. "You want to leave too?" he snapped. Fear took hold of the room. Rosa, her eyes full of tears, walked toward the door without looking back. The veteran tried to stand up to follow her, but his legs wouldn't respond. He remained seated, speechless, in front of a plate that now made no sense. The entire caf watched her leave, and no one knew what to say. The clock read 11:52 when the door closed behind her. Outside, the cold cut like a knife. Rosa stood still for a few seconds in the drizzle, as if waiting for someone to follow her, for someone to shout her name, for someone to say, "This is wrong." But it didn't happen. No one came out. No one spoke up, because in this world, sometimes good people fall without a sound, and it hurts. It hurts because it feels real, because we've seen it before, because we've been witnesses and perhaps accomplices to similar silences. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you think. Rosa walked aimlessly, clutching the apron in her fingers. She had worked at that caf for 18 years. She had watched the customers' children grow up. She had served coffee to 3 generations. She had listened to the sorrows of the lonely, and all of it was gone in seconds. Why? For giving a plate of food to someone who needed it. Tears fell without permission, but not from sadness, from helplessness, from rage, from that pain born when they take your dignity and don't even bother to look you in the eye while doing it. Meanwhile, inside the caf, Richard sat down at the veteran's table. "Finish eating and get out. Don't come back," he told him. The old man didn't answer. He just lowered his gaze and picked up his cap, the same cap he wore when he went to risk his life 40 years ago. At that moment, no one noticed that a group of uniformed men had stopped in front of the establishment's door, watching the scene from outside with eyes full of contained fury. There were 4 of them, 4 active duty Marines. The 4 Marines stood motionless for a few seconds in front of the caf door, observing through the fogged glass. They wore their dress uniforms, and their faces were as hard as stone. The tallest pushed the door open without a word. The sound of boots striking the wooden floor immediately drew everyone's attention. Richard, still wearing an expression of arrogance, turned toward them. "How can I help you?" he said, with no trace of courtesy. The Marines didn't answer right away. Their eyes fell on the old man who was still picking up his cap with trembling hands. The most senior of the group stepped forward, took off his own cap, and spoke in a deep voice. "Who was it that humiliated Sergeant Owens?" Richard let out a dry laugh, trying to impose his authority. "Humiliate? I was just bringing order to this place. No one has the right to give away food here without my authorization, much less to beggars." One of the Marines clenched his fists. The atmosphere grew tense to the breaking point. A waitress dropped a cup. No one moved. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was a silence charged with rage. The veteran, still without a word, lifted his gaze for the first time and nodded slowly toward the soldiers. It was him. It was Owens. And these men were not just customers. They were brothers in arms. "That beggar, as you call him," one of the Marines said, "is the man who saved our lives in Fallujah. If we're alive today, it's because of him, and you threw him out like he was trash." The soldier's voice shattered the air. Richard turned pale. He began to stammer something about company rules and internal policies, but no one was listening anymore. The customers, who had been silent before, now began to talk among themselves, murmuring, indignant. An elderly couple stood up and approached the veteran. "My son served with you," the woman said. "Thank you for everything, Mr. Owens." Meanwhile, Rosa, still walking in the drizzle, knew nothing of what was happening. She moved forward without direction, sadness pounding in her chest, until a car pulled up beside her. It was the same couple who had thanked the veteran. "Get in, please. You have to come back," they told her. Rosa hesitated, but the sincerity in the woman's eyes convinced her. When she walked into the cafe, soaking wet, trembling, what she found was something she never expected. All the customers were on their feet. The veteran was in the center, surrounded by the Marines, and in front of him stood Richard, his head bowed, unable to meet anyone's gaze. One of the Marines took Rosa's apron, which was still lying on the table, folded it carefully, and handed it to her. "This place is worthless without you," he said. Rosa took it without a word, her eyes full of tears. The customers began to applaud. It was a slow, powerful, heartfelt applause, one that wasn't for show, but for justice. Richard, feeling all the power he had used for humiliation now turning against him, tried to regain control. "This is insane. I'm the manager here." But at that moment, the original owner of the cafe, Don Ernesto, walked into the establishment. Someone had called him. Don Ernesto was an older man, known and respected by everyone. He walked straight to Richard and, without raising his voice, said, "Pack your things. You will never set foot in this place again." Richard tried to defend himself, but Ernesto gave him no choice. "Here, we serve coffee, but we also serve dignity, and you don't understand a thing about that." They escorted him out of the establishment, and the door closed behind him like a period at the end of a sentence. No one applauded, only silence returned. A very different kind of silence, one full of peace. The veteran sat down again. Rosa served him a new plate, this time with steady hands. He looked at her and whispered, "Thank you, child." Ever since then, every Thursday, at the same time, the cafe keeps a special table with a small plaque that reads, "Reserved for Sergeant Owens and for those who gave everything and asked for nothing." Rosa still serves there, stronger than ever, and with a dignity that no one can ever take away from her. Many of the customers who were present that day return week after week, not just for the coffee, but for the living memory of what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Because there are gestures that, however small they seem, are capable of changing destinies. And yes, sometimes injustice seems to win, but only for a moment. Because when the truth finds its way, there is no greater force. Rosa didn't just get her job back. She regained the respect of an entire community. And as she walks between the tables, with her clean apron and her smile intact, Everyone knows they are being served by someone who chose kindness over fear, and that, in this world, is still worth something.